Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
My name is Tracy Grove. I am with the Services Organization. I'm in communications, so I'm not part of MSR, but I'm very grateful to be here today, so thank you for allowing me to crash your party. I'm very pleased to welcome Jacqueline Carver to the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. Jacqueline and I met about 6 months ago now, I'd say. I've done some research around fear in the workplace and mindfulness, and I'm looking to bring that program into the company. And so I had reached out to Jacqueline, having heard a lot about the potential project and the work that they were doing around performance and mindfulness, and fabulous, fabulous work that they're doing. So very excited to see you back in person to talk to us. She's here to discuss her book, 1 Second Ahead, Enhance Your Performance at Work with Mindfulness. I think this is really good timing for us as a company, because as we transform and we're going through so much change, it feels like it's a great time to be thinking about how we build our awareness around mindfulness and how we find those practical tools and tips to help us get through what is a very tumultuous time of change for all of us. So we're very happy to have her here. Jacqueline has over 20 years of consulting experience, helping organizations manage change and achieve results. She's passionate about helping individuals and organizations realize their potential through training the mind. She is a partner and director at the Potential Project and is a contributor at the Huffington Post. Please join me in giving her a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. Thank you. Well, it is great to be here, especially that you've all chose to be in here as opposed to enjoying this beautiful weather. I mean, you could be outside jumping in puddles right now. So I feel really privileged that you chose to join this session with me today. So as Tracy said, I am ridiculously passionate about mindfulness and its application to work. And you'll find that out in the next, certainly in the next 40 minutes. But one of the things that I wanted to just check in, a couple questions before we get started. First of all, how many people know anything about mindfulness? Okay. Okay, how many people have never heard about mindfulness at all? All right, a few of you, great. So what I wanted to start out with is just a common definition that hopefully we can all use for the next little while so that we can all agree that we're talking about the same thing. Fundamentally, what I want to invite you to consider is that mindfulness is a set of tools and techniques to enhance mental effectiveness. Does that sound good as a starting point? So how many here would like to know how to enhance your mental effectiveness? Okay, then we're all in the right session. Okay, so that's great. So what I want to do today is I actually want to cover 3 things. First of all, I want to talk to you about why I think it is so important to talk about mindfulness and mental effectiveness in today's work environment. Secondly, what I'd like to do is actually talk to you about what is mindfulness, give you more of a definition, and actually introduce a mindfulness practice together. The third thing is I want to make absolute sure that you walk away from this session and you have something practical, tactical, that you can actually take away and apply when you go back to your work. Does that sound good? All right. Now, before we get started, I'll just give you a little bit more of my history. So I was with Deloitte for many years. Actually, I worked here in Seattle. One of my clients was Puget Sound Energy. And I also worked in Canada. I'll say about, and then you can figure out that, yes, I am Canadian, and we can get over it. And I also worked in Australia, and I loved it. I mean, I was in a Deloitte Consulting, as you probably know, very high pressure, always on, very professional environment. And at the same time, I was also a long-term mindfulness practitioner. Now, at that point in time, this was again many years ago, mindfulness wasn't as popular as it is today. And in fact, mindfulness at that time, and even still a little bit today, people would see mindfulness as being a little bit flaky or woo-woo. Anybody maybe think that that might be still true a little bit today? Maybe, yes? So when I was with Deloitte Consulting, I was a very strong mindfulness practitioner, but I was in the closet. Because the last thing that I was going to tell a bunch of utility workers at Puget Sound Energy was that I like to sit and count my breaths for any period of time, because that just wouldn't go over well. So this idea of mindfulness and how do we actually connect it to business? Because mindfulness, often people have this idea it's about sitting still and being slow. But what does that mean in terms of business results, which I'm hoping is what we'll be able to connect those dots today in this session today. Now, again, for me, it's been a really exciting journey because, as I said, when I started out as a practitioner in mindfulness, it wasn't that popular. But actually, when we look today, there's so many companies now that are introducing mindfulness into their organizations. And these are not just flaky or woo-woo companies like Google. It's actually companies like serious companies like Sony, like Nike, like IKEA. And actually, the Potential Project, we're actually working with your colleagues in Europe and doing programs, many programs with your colleagues. But you can also see, banks. We also work in heavy industries. So this idea of mindfulness into organizations, why is that so important? And what I want to suggest to you, and actually consider how this applies to you, is what we see working with organizations around the globe, that there's really two reasons why companies find mindfulness to be so beneficial. The first reason has to do with what's going on in the external reality. The second reason has to go with what's going on in the internal reality. I'll start off with the external reality. In terms of the external reality, what we see in organizations all around the world is they're characterized by four common qualities. One is some degree of pressure. Two, being always on. Three, information overload. And D for distractions. Now, how many of you can relate to at least 3 out of those 4? How many are going 4 for 4? Outstanding. Yeah, so this idea that we're all feeling this pressure, being always on, as Tracy talked about, lots of complexities in daily work life. Now, here's another interesting question for you. How many of you think just on its own, or maybe because you're Microsoft, you'll be able to fix it somehow, that somehow this paid reality is just going to naturally get better? Any optimists in the room? No one. Okay. Oh, yes. Thank you. There's always one. Thank you. All right. For the rest of you, though, and probably for me as well, I think that this is our reality today, and it's probably going to be challenging for us in terms of the experience that we have at the workplace. Correct? So that's the external reality. It's tough, and it's probably going to get tougher. But now what we want to do is look at the internal reality. And for that, the question that I would ask you is, how important are results to you? Is that obvious? Yes? They're important, right? Results, and that can be whether it's actually at work or at home. Results are important to us in terms of making sure that we're actually doing things, achieving things that are important to us. So the next question is, if we want to look at the internal reality, we say, where do results come from? And what we know is that results basically come from our actions come from our choices, and our choices come from basically how well we manage our attention. Does that make sense? Right? So there's a direct link between how well we pay attention and what we pay attention to and what results we end up achieving. Have you ever got really great results without actually paying attention? If you are, you're very lucky, right? Most of us, it's that attention and that focus that leads to the results that we want to achieve. So if this is true, that it makes a direct link between attention and results, this next slide, I'm going to warn you in advance, it's a little bit scary. Are you ready for it? Researchers have shown that over the last decade, our ability to pay attention is getting less and less and less. Does that make sense? Can people experience that in their daily lives? Do you want me to put a number on it? Ready for this? Researchers have said that on average, 46.9% of the time, that's average, we are not paying attention to what is now. Our mind is involuntarily wandering. So that means, although I can see all of you in the room, some of you have left. Some of you are thinking about the meeting that you had before you came here. Some of you might be thinking about what you did next or what you need to go to afterwards. So this idea that oftentimes our mind isn't necessarily where we want it to be. And if that's true, then the question is, what implication does that have from a business perspective in terms of us achieving the results? Because if we look at that in terms of business, what that basically means is that 53.1% of the time we're focused, we're results-driven, we can be creative, we're engaged in our job, but 46.9% of the time we're distracted, we're inefficient, we can be rigid in our thinking, we can be overwhelmed and stressed. But this is just average. You guys are Microsoft, so I'm sure this is not true for you, right? Right? Well, should we test it? just to have a little bit of fun? Yes? You ready for that? It won't hurt much, I promise. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set my timer for 45 seconds. And what I want you to do is I want you to have one thought. You can pick that thought. It doesn't have to be about work, but you can only think about that one thought and nothing else. Are the instructions clear? All right, ready, set, go. All right. So, would anybody like to share what happened? Yes, the optimist.
I was doing pretty well until my watch buzzed.
Until your watch buzzed and then you got distracted?
I said, well, I wonder who that is.
Very good, thank you. Anybody else? Thank you so much for sharing. Yes?
I did pretty well because I focused on the basketball team that I coach and
Right.
how we could run a better zone offense. And so because I had something specifically that I was targeting, I was able to do that pretty reasonably well.
All right.
I did feel the temptation to wander, though.
You did feel the temptation? All right. Yes, what was your experience?
I was thinking about lentil soup
Yep.
and just how it's constructed and stuff. And then I noticed that I was kind of rapid firing in my brain all these various different things about the soup.
Right.
And as soon as I paused, I started to kind of wonder
Right.
quickly.
Right. Did anybody else have an experience where you at least tempted or during that 45 seconds had other thoughts? Or thinking about what you should be thinking about? So meta thoughts, right? Or thinking about, did anybody challenge, does Jacqueline actually know how to count 45 seconds? Did anybody challenge that? I have had people say, Jacqueline, that was the longest 45 seconds of my life. And the reason why I actually take out my phone and time it is because I have had people say there was no way that was 45 seconds. Because, 45 seconds, it's really quite interesting. I let you pick what you wanted to think about, right? It didn't have to be at work. It could be something you like coaching your basketball team. And for most of us, that wasn't even a minute. And for most of us, it's actually quite hard to stay focused on one thought. And again, if we tie that back to how important it is managing our attention and results, it shows that it really can be challenging in terms of the internal reality to be able to help us achieve the results that we want to at work. So it's a little bit like John here. This is John. He works at Microsoft, but he didn't want to come to the mindfulness training, just so you know. So it's not anyone here. Now, John, actually, he's got a really important report that he's got to write. But where are his thoughts? Golfing, right. How well do you think he's going to do on his report? Probably not so well. Somebody at one session said, yeah, but if his report is on golf, he might be doing okay. His report is not on golf, just so you know. It's something technical. So he's probably not going to do so well. But here's the interesting thing. If we follow John a little later in the day, not today, this must be another day, here he is out on the golf course, and now where are his thoughts? The correct answer is his wife, okay? I've done this workshop all around the world. The correct answer is his wife. I know John, that's his wife. Her name is Sally. Okay, now here's the interesting thing, and I really want you to look at this and see if you can relate to it. Here John is now finally having that romantic dinner with his wife. Where are his thoughts? Back at work, back at the report that he never finished writing. So here's the thing, and this is the reality that many of us experience, is oftentimes our thoughts are not necessarily where we need them to be. And it not only impacts us in terms of our effectiveness at work or the things that we enjoy, but also in terms of our social relations. So this, from our perspective, I said the first thing that I wanted to cover is hopefully inspire you to say, This is why I believe it's so important for us to look at our mental effectiveness and look at how our minds actually can sometimes negatively impact our ability to be effective in the workplace. But I didn't come here to depress you about a reality that you guys already probably can relate to and probably know. I came here to give you hope. And here's where the hope comes from. Hope comes from something called neuroplasticity. Is there anybody here that's heard of neuroplasticity? Yeah, so it's basically, neuroplasticity is the ability of our brains to change based on how we use it. And this is incredibly cool because basically what that means, what scientists have discovered over the last 2 decades, is that we're not stuck. The brain that you have right now is actually not the same brain that you're going to have tomorrow, or the next week, or the next week. Our brains are constantly changing based on how we use it. So if there's a limitation for us, something that we would like to change about our brain, one of the things that we know that we can do is we can actually train our brain to be able to enhance our performance. So specifically, we know that we can train our brain if our attention is something that we want to be able to be more attentive, whether it's with our colleagues or even at home, we know that we can train it. So another way of looking at mindfulness is really the ability to train the mind to be able to better manage our attention. So if you look at what's in the center of the circle, so this idea of how well can we train our brains to focus on the task at hand and not allow the pressures, the distractions, and all of the other things to get in our way. So it's a little bit like this picture, this idea of going to the mental gym, going to the gym to train the attentional muscle. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Do you want to give it a try? You ready? All right. So what I want to introduce you to is an extremely basic mindfulness training method. Now, this is so basic, you're going to look at me and you're going to go, I can't believe that's actually going to help me. Because it's simple by design. Because you already have enough complexity in your life. I don't want to give you something complicated because then you won't do it. So I'm going to give you something so simple that hopefully you'll be able to remember it and actually, if you're inspired by it, actually start to practice it on a daily basis. Are you ready for it? So the method is A, B, C, D. See if it all comes up. There we go. A, B, C, D. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through what each of the letters mean, and then we'll actually do a mindfulness training exercise together. So starting out with the A. The A is for anatomy. And one of the things you might be asking yourself is, why, if I've been talking so much of the importance of training the mind, why would I need to focus on my body? And basically what we want to be able to do is make sure that our body doesn't get in our way. Because if our body is stressed, it actually creates tension in the mind. So I'm actually going to invite you right now, we won't start the practice quite yet, but just take a moment to just notice how relaxed are you? Are you sitting comfortably? Actually, just notice in your body. If I were to say to you to sit right now with relaxed alertness, what does relaxed alertness mean for you? Remember, we are in the mental gym. So I see people sitting up a little bit. So that's very helpful to have a little bit of a straight back. Ideally, you want to feel grounded, feet on the floor. You can just put your hands in your lap. And you just want to feel comfortable, but it's not a Saturday afternoon comfortable sitting on the couch. This is the mental gym. So you might even want to take a moment, because you're probably coming from at least a half day, Tuesday morning, I guess, at work, and just even relax your shoulders. Make sure that you just notice any tension that you might be experiencing and just give yourself a little bit of a gift to say you're just going to release a little bit of that tension. And that's essentially what we want to do with the A for anatomy. Now the B stands for breathing. If we want to be able to go to the mental gym, we need to be able to have an anchor. We need to be able to have something to focus on. And the B is basically just an object. I mean, truthfully, we could use a pen or this clicker. But the breath is fantastic because the breath is always with us. So that way we can do this training whether we're in our office, whether we're about to do a presentation, whether we're in a meeting, anywhere we go. Actually, I should have asked you, are you all breathing? Yes, then you have the tool. See how easy that is. So the breath is just, and what we're going to do is when we focus on the breath, I'm going to invite you to just focus on it as a neutral observer. So you're not trying to breathe deep or long or slow or quick or anything. All I want you to do is just notice your own experience of breathing. So you simply breathe in and breathe out. Now when you do that, you may be tempted to try to control it because probably, like most people, we have the tendency to want to try to control things that we're observing. Just observe that and let it go. Don't try to control it. Just let it be. Is that clear? Now to help you out, the C is for counting. And what I'm going to invite you to do, you'll breathe in, you'll breathe out, and just a quick count 1, breathe in, breathe out, quick count 2, all the way up to 10. And when we get to 10, it gets very exciting. Then we count backwards back down to 1 and just continue in cycles. Is that clear? Now the D is for distractions, and this is really where the real training happens. Because if you're at all normal, at some point during this, you will get distracted. And that's actually a moment to celebrate, because when you notice that you are distracted, that is actually when you're being mindful. You are aware that you are no longer focused on the object of your choice. And you get to make actually flexing the attentional muscle, bringing your attention back to the object of your focus, which is the breath. And just start counting from 1 again. Does that make sense? Are you guys ready to give it a try? Any questions before we get started? All right, so what we'll do is I'll set my timer, and I will suggest that if it's easier for you, you can close your eyes when we do this. But if you're uncomfortable closing your eyes, I just recommend having a soft gaze, 45-degree angle, just looking at the floor so you don't get distracted by your colleagues. I'll set my timer. We'll try it just for 5 minutes. I'll guide you a little bit, and then there'll be a little bit of silence, and then afterwards we'll see how it goes. Sound good? All right, so I'll just set my timer. And ready, set, starting now. So again, taking a moment to just tune in with your anatomy, noticing any tension that you might be experiencing anywhere in your body, and allowing yourself the gift of a moment to just relax in an otherwise busy day. And when you're ready, turning your attention to the experience of breathing. Observing your breath neutrally. Watching it go in and watching it go out. And when you're ready, begin counting on the out-breath, 1 up to 10, and 10 back down to 1. And if at any point you get distracted, celebrate that moment of awareness. And simply return your attention to the breath and start counting from 1 again. And continue like this in silence. And when you're ready, returning your attention to the room. All right, what I'd like you to do is turn to a neighbor, and I want you to share one thing that worked well and one thing that was a little bit challenging. And for those of you online, if you just want to take some notes, one thing that worked well and one thing that you found challenging. Can everybody pair up somehow? All right, coming back. All right, who would like to share one thing that went well for them? Yes.
Felt very relaxed, maybe a bit too relaxed.
Right, right. Great. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Yes.
I like the counting down from 10. Sometimes I count up the whole way and like my ego starts getting involved.
Right.
And that just takes that out. That's nice.
Great. Great. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Yes.
I think for me, I didn't even reach 10.
Right.
Yeah, most of the time I got distracted and went back to count one, but I was happy I was able to notice that I'm getting distracted.
Exactly. And that's such a key point. The objective of the exercise is not actually to see how many times you can get to 10 and back down to 1. It's actually to notice when you're distracted, because that's when you're really flexing the attentional muscle. So that's great training. Great. How about, yes, Amy?
There's a few comments from online of people saying that they had nearly fell asleep.
Yes, okay. So that is actually the most common challenge in mindfulness training, is that especially for those of you who may have, if I invited you to close your eyes, then you may actually find that that is one of the biggest challenges. There's 2 reasons why you start to fall asleep in mindfulness training. The first one is because you are tired. The majority of Americans are sleep deprived. They say something like 70% of us are simply not getting enough sleep at night. And actually, let me just ask you this. For those of you who may have trouble getting to sleep, what often is it that keeps you awake? Thoughts, exactly. So if there's no other motivation that I can give you today to try mindfulness training, one of the things that they've shown conclusively is that mindfulness training, because it helps you let go of a lot of those thoughts, clear the mental clutter so you can actually get good quality sleep at night. The second reason, though, that you might fall asleep during mindfulness training is because it's so weird to be sitting still in the workplace. And when I invite you to do that, it's like, oh, it must be nap time. How nice is that? If that happens to you, the invitation is to just sit up a little straighter, remembering that you're in the gym. Open up your eyes a little bit if you had them closed to let a bit of light in. And don't beat yourself up over it. It's very common, very natural. Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing that. Any other challenges that people had? Yes?
The biggest challenge I had was I'd get up to 6 or 7 or 8, something like that, and realize, oh, for the last 4 counts, I was thinking about something else. So it took me a long time to recognize that my mind was indeed wandering because I was still counting.
Yeah.
So it felt like I was doing all the right things, but then I realized, oh, wait a second, but I shouldn't be thinking about X, Y, Z.
Exactly. So basically you were going on autopilot with accounting and still getting distracted, but awesome awareness. That's great. Somebody else had another, yeah?
I felt like I was spending a lot of effort trying to breathe in and out. And so it didn't seem like I was breathing normally.
Yeah.
Actually, it was regulated breathing.
And what's really interesting, and that was one of the things I said, is oftentimes when people do this, is they try to control their breath. And it's actually really challenging for us. It's a really good exercise because there's lots of things in life that you can't control. So actually training yourself to let something be is a really great training in and of itself. But it's hard for many people. Thank you for sharing. Tracy.
I found sounds in the room.
Yeah.
It was like dog after squirrel. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Exactly.
So it's kind of funny. So when a couple of phones went off and things, it's like, oh.
Exactly.
Where was I again?
Exactly. Which is, again, and this is training. The ABCD method is designed to be something that you can do in a busy office environment. I'm guessing that it probably is distracting in your work environment. So if you can train yourself to do this, the idea of doing this isn't to be able to do it in a perfectly quiet space, because even at home, there's probably not perfectly quiet places. So the idea is to notice that it's just a distraction, come back to the breath, start counting from 1 again. Anyone else? Any other challenges that people had?
I'm wondering, what's normal breathing? Because once I pay attention to it, am I breathing normally? And
Right, right.
Or am I controlling it?
So you start to analyze your breathing. Yeah, exactly. So again, thoughts. So really, that's just a distraction. Anything that isn't the breath, any thoughts, even if they're thoughts about the breath, they're just distractions. So let them all go. Just focus on the breath. Amy, did you have something else from online?
Exact comment, yeah.
The exact comment. So there's oftentimes 3 challenges in mindfulness training. The first one, as I said to you, the most common, is that you get sleepy. The second challenge that people had, which is actually maybe very similar to what you were articulating, was this idea that you tried too hard. And actually maybe that was a good for you to maybe go backwards, kind of your experience, is that people, most people, especially in a workplace, and I can tell you from my own experience, type A personality, I want to be the best at mindfulness training. I want to count 1 to 10 and 10 back down to 1 1,000,000 times. And that just creates tension for us. So one of the invitations, and thank you for sharing that you felt relaxed, even though maybe too relaxed, but that continual ability that we want to make sure that we can be very, 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 very focused, but also very relaxed, not creating unnecessary tension. The third challenge, which could be similar to, I think, what you were talking about, is just our minds are so busy, or we're getting distracted. And quite honestly, that's just normal, but it's also a really good thing to notice. Because if right now your mind is really cluttered, maybe you don't want to have that really crucial conversation with one of your employees. Maybe you want to do something to clear your mind a little bit so that you can actually be less cluttered. So when we're doing our mindfulness training, there's 3 core qualities that we're looking at developing. We want to be able to relax because that's so important, but with relaxed alertness. We want to train ourselves to be able to be focused on an object of our choice. And we also want to clear the mental clutter. So we're training ourselves to have a more clear mind. So those are the 3 things that we look for as we're doing that training. Now what I want to show you now is actually what's happening in your brain when you're doing that training. And this is images from an fMRI scan actually looking at the active participation of people as they're going through that process that you just went through. And basically here, what you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, this part of the brain is actually what they know is related to when we're focusing our attention. It's like the traffic cop for the mind. It's what says, I'm going to pay attention to you, I'm not going to pay attention to you. So that area of the brain is really, really, really important to us. We know that our mind just naturally wanders. It has a natural tendency, and sometimes mind wandering isn't actually a bad thing. But it's really important to notice it. When our mind wanders, it pulls up either from somatic experiences, so something from a touch, from sounds, but oftentimes from memories, from thoughts. And you can see how it activates different parts of the brain. This is the key part in the training, and that was your experience. This is when you're actually aware that your mind is wandering. That's that aha moment where now you have a choice. And you can redirect your attention and bring it back to focusing on the object of your choice. And what we know is going through this cycle again and again and again, this part of the brain actually grows. It's actually a thickening of the prefrontal cortex. And I don't know about you guys, but in my paid reality, I want the thickest traffic cop for my attention that I possibly can get. And so that's the idea. And even just now, after doing that training just once, it actually helps. Every time you do it, the brain just continues to redevelop and rewire so that you can be more attentive and more focused, not only at work, but also in everything you do in life. Any questions about that? So just to look at just a little bit more about the research, as I said, there's tons of research on this, one of them being enhanced sleep quality. Also, huge benefits from a workplace perspective. They've shown that people reduce stress, enhance their performance, enhance job satisfaction, and many other things. And if any of you are interested in the research behind this, I just share this with you because for me, it's very motivating to see what the science actually says. Again, that simple exercise sounds so simple, but a lot of really compelling evidence in terms of the potential benefits. But what I want to do now is, like I said, I want to make it practical for you. I want to give you something that you can actually walk away with out of this session and use when you go back to your office. To do that, what I want to first introduce is this idea that work life has changed significantly. I mean, I don't know, does everybody in the room know what this is? Some of you, you know what this is? I know you're very young. So, I mean, this, I was trained on one of these, so I'm old enough to remember what this is. But for most of us, especially you guys at Microsoft, I mean, your worlds look much more like this, right? Constant distractions, lots of things. Now, again, this is talking about the mind. Does anybody know what happens to our mind when we're getting lots of streams of information and we try to do them all at the same time? Does anybody know the word for what we try when we try to do lots of things at the same time? Multitasking. Are there any really good multitaskers in the room? No one's willing to admit that because you may know what's coming next. All right, what I want to do is I want to invite you to test your multitasking skills. Are you game? All right, if you could all make sure that you have a paper, there should be paper for everyone, and a pencil or a pen. And online you can do this as well, and Amy's just handing out some to anybody that doesn't have any. This is, again, just another fun little exercise, and we'll just test your multitasking skills. It also won't hurt much, I promise. What I want you to do when I say go, has everybody got a paper and pencil now? Okay, great. What I want you to do is first, I want you to just draw 4 horizontal lines like you see on the screen on your piece of paper. All right, good. All right, now what I want you to do, only when I say go, so this is a test of your attention, not yet. When I say go, I'm going to invite you to write, I am a great multitasker on the first line, and the numbers 1 to 20 on the second line. I am going to be calling out increments of 5 seconds, and I want you to simply take note of how long it took you to write all of the letters and all of the numbers. Are the instructions clear? No. Okay, when I say go, you're just going to write, I am a great multitasker, and the numbers 1 to 20, and just make note of how long it took you. Clear? All right, ready, set, go. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. 25. And 30. I think everyone's done. Okay, great. All right, now it's going to get a little bit more interesting. What I'm going to invite you to do when I say go, and only when I say go, is now I want you to do this. You're going to write I and then 1, A and then 2, M and then 3, until you've written all of the letters and all of the numbers. Are the instructions clear? Ready, set, go. 5 seconds. 10. 15. 20. 25. 30. 35. 40. 45. And 50. And if you're not done, don't worry about it. It really wasn't that important anyway. Okay, so let me ask you a couple questions. How many of you made any mistakes in the first exercise? How many of you made mistakes or almost made mistakes in the second exercise? Almost all of you. Okay, how many of you found that the second exercise took longer? By how much on average? Twice as much. Okay. And how many of you found that this was pretty easy, but this was a little bit more stressful? So interesting, we learned 3 interesting things about multitasking. 1, we make more mistakes. 2, it takes longer. And 3, it actually creates stress. Now what's interesting is, I don't know about you, but certainly when I was with Deloitte, one of the things that they actually hired for was, are you a great multitasker? In your work environment, is multitasking something that at least people try to do? Are you tempted to do or praised to do? And this is basically, and what's really interesting is there's been a lot of research now on multitasking, which is why I think most of you didn't put up your hands about being a good multitasker. But what we know actually is this is actually research that was done a number of years ago at Stanford University. And the researchers actually were set out initially to find out what are the benefits of multitasking, because it was all the rage in terms of every organization wanted great multitaskers. And what they found is they found 0 benefits, but they found a whole bunch of downsides. Specifically, just like your experience, they found that it reduces our efficiency because of that switch time. They found that people lost a sense of overview. Did anybody forget how to count in the second exercise? Right, what number comes after 16? It also decreases our quality because we make more mistakes. I'll come back to this one afterwards. It hampers our creativity. Did anybody feel like your brain was just a little bit fuller in the second exercise? So you don't have that space for creative thinking. It also drains our energy. Every time we switch tasks, it's not free. Right? It's mental energy. The brain is basically using glucose and oxygen. If we use it unnecessarily to switch back and forth, we're actually using up mental energy. It also reduces our well-being because we become more stressed. And here's the actual scary one. Researchers now shown that basically the number of times that people check their phone on an ongoing basis is directly related to the shrinkage of the prefrontal cortex. That traffic cop that I told you about, it actually gets smaller. Because essentially what happens is because the brain changes, like I said, the brain basically changes based on how you use it. So if you want to be a really good multitasker, multitask all the time. Then you'll have a brain that's constantly not efficient, has low prioritization, is not very creative, and all of the rest. Because it creates habits for us. Does that make sense? So the question, yes?
So, you said that you can train.
Yes.
Can you train to be a better multitasker?
The research says no. Based on the research says that in terms of our ability to pay attention, it's basically a one-lane road. We can keep other things in our awareness, but in terms of our attention, if we really want to be efficient and effective, what we need to do is we need to not multitask. And what I'll show you now is I want to give you 2 rules to be able to walk away with on how you can avoid the multitasking trap. Ready? So these are the 2 rules of mental effectiveness. And this is basically taking the ABCD training that I walked you through and now putting it into action. The first rule, rule number 1, is focus on what you choose. So when you go back to your office, when you're sitting at your desk and you have a really important email to write, focus on what you choose. Just like you focus on the breath, now the object of your choice is the email. And it looks like this. You're focusing on the email and your colleagues walk by and they start talking about some great party that they're going to tonight, right? This happens, right? And your brain, because your brain is kind of a sucker for anything that's more interesting than you're not doing right now, it's called shiny object syndrome, right? Your brain wants to, oh, I wonder what they're talking about. But you've trained your brain. You've gone to the mental gym. You say, that is just a distraction. I'm going to let that go, just like you do in the mindfulness training. And you put your focus back on the email because you want to be able to get it done so that you're efficient and you're effective and you can go on to the next thing. Or what happens is you're sitting there and you start thinking about the meeting that you have to go after you finish this email. That's just a distraction. It's just making you less efficient, less creative. more likely to make mistakes. Does that make sense? Rule number 1. Sounds simple, but it's challenging if we don't focus on it. Now here's the thing. You're sitting there, you're typing that email, and your boss comes into your office. And she looks really funny. Her face is red, her hair's standing on end, and she says, I need you in my office right now because our most important client is having a major issue. And you say, you know what? I just attended this mindfulness training session, and she told me I could just focus on what I choose. Rule number 1. Is that going to work out well? Probably not. So we need a second rule. The second rule is, and this is equally important, is choose your distractions mindfully. So the colleagues talking, that's just a distraction. The thoughts about what comes next, that's just a distraction. Your boss is probably a distraction that you want to pay attention to. And she probably wouldn't like you calling her a distraction. Just a note to self. But you don't want to do one of these, right? You don't want to say, yes, boss, because what are you doing then? You're multitasking, right? So what you do is you completely let go of the email. You take your full attention, point it on your boss, and now she becomes rule number 1. Is that clear? Can you try to implement that when you get back to the office? Should I make it even simpler for you? I'm going to put it in a 2x2 matrix. Are you ready? All right. So matrix of mental effectiveness, the ABCD training in a 2x2 matrix. Basically what this looks like is, as opposed to being distracted and having that wandering mind, we want to have a sharp focus. That's when we're paying attention to the breath or to the email. Same thing. That's the vertical. On the horizontal, we don't want to be on autopilot, where we're basically being mindless about what's happening. We want to make sure that we're aware of what we're focusing on. Now, if I put numbers in those quadrants, where would you say you perform at your best? 2, right? Why is that? Sorry? Lots of attention and focus. Exactly. So that's basically another definition from this session. We can define being mindful as basically when we're focused on the right things and we're aware of those things that we're not going to be focused on. So that sweet spot of focused attention. Can you see any other quadrant that might be useful at any other point in time? Yeah. 1. How come?
If you need to do repetitive tasks, like in Excel,
Yep.
you want to be in 1 for maybe that time to get that done effectively.
Absolutely. And we call that, it could be considered kind of a flow state. Also for athletes that just want to focus on what they're doing and not actually have to think too much about it. Although I hope those Excel sheets aren't like payment terms or something. Anyway, we won't go there. Can anybody else see any other quadrant that might be beneficial at certain points in time? Can you see any benefits of sometimes having a distracted mind? Anybody see any benefits? Yeah.
I'm sure this could get me in some trouble with some attorneys somewhere, but driving in 3.
And driving in 3.
Mm-hmm.
You want to drive in 3? Can you tell me where you live? Because I don't want to drive near you.
I think along these lines where you've got, the basic execution of what you're doing on the road, even that awareness is on autopilot, but you've got higher brain function available to process what you're listening to on the radio and those types of things to help keep engaged and not nod off.
Yeah. For me, driving would not be, I would not want to drive with other, would you want to drive with other people that are in quadrant 3?
If they're having a conversation with me while they're driving.
Well, that's interesting. It's interesting. And for me, it's actually, I think it's what is amazing to me about the brain. It's amazing that we can drive on autopilot, because we know we can. I mean, many of us have probably had the experience where you get home and you have no idea how you got there. So for me, it really is quite impressive. But the thing that I would challenge you on in terms of driving a vehicle and being on autopilot is if I put you in the middle of Shanghai and said, can you now drive on autopilot? You would not be able, my assumption is you would not be able to, because you would actually have to pay attention to what you're doing. And I actually think that also, even, because I mean, things can come up that are unexpected. But the other quadrant, yeah.
When you have muscle memory,
absolutely,
and you train, right? You're on autopilot, whether it's riding a bike or swinging a golf club.
Exactly.
The less you think, the better you do.
Exactly. And that's why there's nothing wrong with being in flow. And that's a lot of athletics are in that space. Yeah.
I think 3, like running while listening to an audiobook or something, would that be 3?
Yeah, well, I don't think so, because to me, I mean, I'm a runner. And it depends on what I'm paying attention to. So am I paying attention to the music? Am I paying attention to my feet hitting the pavement? I can't think of anything nice in 3, but I can think of something nice in 4. So 4, oftentimes we look at in terms of being a space for creativity. You know, sometimes it's nice to kind of let go of that sharp focus and just open your mind up and see what possibilities. But the idea being is that if you actually want to turn those great ideas into innovation, something that you can actually turn around, you need to be able to have that ability to manage your focus. For me, quadrant 3, we really couldn't come up with a nice word, and we just called that mindless. That's just my experience. But the invitation for you, this is another tool that I'm hoping that you can take away and use in your day-to-day work life. The invitation to you is to say, okay, where are you right now? In terms of your mind state, where are you in the matrix? What quadrant are you in? And what quadrant do you want to be in? So when you're driving, you can make that choice. Just let me know where you're driving so I can avoid your car. But when you're in a meeting, you know, when you're doing a presentation, when you're about to go into a brainstorming session, what quadrant are you in and where do you want to be? Because one of the key ideas of mindfulness, and certainly mindfulness in terms of enhancing our performance, is that it is a choice. We can choose where we want to place our attention and focus. So this is just another tool that you can use to actually challenge yourself. Where are you and where do you want to be? Yeah.
I'm thinking about situations that are really painful, like in sports where you're pushing yourself to exhaustion, or if you have a physical condition that's very painful. Sometimes I've had the experience of trying to put my mind somewhere else to keep my body going, but to not be in touch with the pain that I'm experiencing. And I don't know if that's a good situation or if it's better to be mindful and really absorb and work through.
Yeah, well, there's 2 things I would say about particularly pain, and I think you're right, it's in an individual experience. For myself, there are times when if I'm ignoring the pain that I'm experiencing, I may be damaging my body. Pain is a way of telling your body there's something wrong. And so if you start blocking out pain, you could actually be not recognizing that you do need to stop, or you do need to do something else. At the same time, though, for me, there's actually a beautiful experience of being mindful of pain. I'm aware that I'm experiencing pain, but if I'm not adding on to anything to it, I'm just allowing myself, I just notice that I have pain. It's actually that ability, I think, from an athletic perspective, to push past it. But it's knowing that, and that's something that fine-tuning your attention to see what your experience is like. Yeah?
I have something I want to share about the physical exercise, for example, running.
Yeah.
I used to, and this is one thing I got from a book called Born to Run.
Yeah.
When you're running, you can think about like the pain is like a child. You can caress your child, like to say to him that the pain is going to be over and you will be fine, and constantly focusing on that pain, on that transition process. Yeah, I find that it's very helpful for me.
Well, and that's a key thing too, again, using the mindfulness training, is the idea being is pain is something you can observe, just like the breath. So you don't try to control it, you don't try to make it go away, you just simply observe it. And actually, I love your analogy of actually being kind to it. And I'm just noticing, I'm happy to take questions afterwards, I'm just noticing the time, so we'll just wrap up, and then those people that need to leave, they can go. But one of the things that I just want you to walk away with is to think about how could you actually apply those 2 rules and the matrix of mental effectiveness? How could you actually apply those to be able to enhance your performance at work? And again, designed to be simple, but not always easy to apply in a busy, always-on, high-pressured work environment. The other aspect that I would just say is just one, like to tell you the story just before we wrap up of 1 Second Ahead. Basically, the story behind it is a client that we worked with. His name was Jacob. He was a partner in a financial services firm, and he was busy, always on, lots of things coming at him. And he came to us and he said, is there any way that you can help me? I feel like my life is out of control, always dictated by other people's demands and requests. Can anybody relate to that? Yes, okay. So he went through our program, which is basically 10 sessions, 1 hour each week, including the mindfulness training exercise that we did, although it advances as we go forward, as well as specifically looking at how can we apply mindfulness into everyday work life. And after 10 weeks, 1 hour each week, in addition to 10 minutes of ABCD on his own each and every day, We said, what did you get out of it? And what he said was, I got 1 second. And at first we thought, oh, that doesn't sound very good. He invested all of this time and he only got 1 second. But what he said was actually really quite interesting. He said is that he had so many inputs that were coming into his life. But the mindfulness training gave him the ability, as opposed to just having those autopilot reactions, like the text come in and he would just answer it. The person comes in and he would just respond. He actually had the ability to be able to have a conscious response to all of those stimuli in his life. So that's really the message that I would like to hopefully inspire you a little bit with this talk today, about this idea of getting 1 second ahead of your own autopilot reactions. What are those things in your life that you find you just get into habitual patterns about how you work? And maybe by having that opportunity to pause in the moment and just make different choices, to be able to respond to life's challenges as opposed to simply react. Thank you so much for your attention today. It was so great to be here. Thank you so much, Amy and the Microsoft Research Center. Thank you, Tracy, for introducing me. I'm happy to stick around if you have any questions at all. And thanks again, and enjoy the weather. So please, I saw, yeah, there was some questions.
Signing, and we can ask questions in line.
Sure.
We actually sign at the front at the podium there.
Okay, great.
And there are books still available if anyone's interested.